In the midst of the pandemic, the Centers for Teaching and Learning, the equivalent services, and their teams of instructional designers, teaching and learning experts, and multimedia developers became the first responders to support the pedagogical and digital transformation of all courses. Overnight, the centers became the academic heroes of COVID-19. They exceeded all expectations for what they could handle in this kind of emergency. To capture firsthand the events and the challenges as they were unfolding in the context of the education disruption caused by COVID-19. I collaborated with 7 researchers: Anne-Louise Davidson from Concordia University, Richard Clark from University of Southern California, Dan Snyder from Dan Snyder Associates, Franklin University, and the Ohio State University, the late Roger Kaufman from Florida State University, Brian Beatty from San Francisco State University, Guy Wallace from EPIC, Inc., and Didier Paclin from Université Laval, and 6 research assistants, Azeneth Patino, Edem Gbetoglo, Céleste Savoie, and Isabelle Fournel from Université Laval, and Nathalie Duponsel and Yvan Rouby from Concordia University. We met with 19 CTLs from Canada, the US, France, the UK, and Lebanon to discuss their role in the transition and transformation of courses, the challenges that they were facing, and the first lessons they've learned and are using now to guide their decisions for the fall semester and the winter semester. So we also collected and analyzed publicly shared resources from 78 CTLs in 68 universities and educational institutions located in 23 countries. Our white paper also includes commentaries from 20 acclaimed researchers in the fields of higher education and education technology who addressed the several challenges higher education is facing and the role of CTLs in addressing them. The move to online courses involved deploying every technology possible, available, accessible. Tech companies that offer digital technologies geared towards education users spared no effort to offer services to help half of the planet's students to move to online courses, to online learning during the COVID-19 shutdown. Please join me now in welcoming Yvan Rouby, Ph.D. candidate in education technology at Concordia University and research assistant on this project. Yvan will present a critical summary of these efforts. Yvan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and thank you and good morning or good day to everyone that is watching this. So as the theme of this symposium implies, we are definitely living in unprecedented times. We are living at times when we might have more questions than answers, but since December 2019, we have definitely been witnessing individual and concerted action from tech companies in different attempts to mitigate the challenges that we have been facing. We have, in different attempts to mitigate the challenges that we have been facing. We have witnessed companies trying to enable continuity of work, education, and social interaction, among other necessities, given the need that we have witnessed in establishing social or physical distancing. One of the first efforts that we have witnessed from digital companies, digital technology companies, has been in increasing access to their platforms. Some estimates stand at about some estimates stand at about a 5 years increase in adoption in a matter of 8 weeks. So things have been moving, and things have been moving fast. So digital technology companies have been trying to increase their access, or the access that they can support to the general public, and also they have to increase their capacity in terms of handling this access and ensuring that the quality of their services is not compromised by the number of people that suddenly flocked to their platforms. We have some estimates standing at about a 5 years worth increase in adoption of digital communication channels in a matter of 8 weeks. So definitely there's been a lot of changes happening very fast. So companies have been trying to offer their services for free or at a reduced fee. So we have multiple examples, and at the moment that we compiled our results for this white paper, we had so many examples, but I'm pretty sure that by this moment we have way more examples. So we have had companies or the tech giants leading these efforts, offering free services, reducing their licenses, offering extended support, or offering enhanced products or services to clients. We have also witnessed companies trying to increase their own capacity, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of increasing their internet rates and internet capacity as well, increasing personnel for support. We have had companies also increasing their own infrastructure to support this sudden increase. But we have also witnessed companies offering support to educators. We all know that in the field of education, at the first moments of the pandemic or with the first effects of the pandemic, we have definitely witnessed a disruption in teaching and learning. We have definitely witnessed what was called emergency remote teaching, which was essentially activities that were planned on being delivered face-to-face, being delivered online. So then there was a lot of questions, there was a lot of efforts around it, and definitely digital technology companies also played a role in it in trying to support it. So we have had digital technology companies creating resources to help teachers from all different levels, from early childhood to university. And in our white paper, we focused at universities. But we have also witnessed digital technology companies trying to increase equity and accessibility in all these efforts. There is this effect called the Matthew effect. Essentially, the rich get richer, and that's what the effect presupposes. So with this increase, in use, in availability of technological platforms, there was also the concern that only those who were already predisposed to make better use of these platforms would actually benefit from them. So then digital technology companies also tried playing a role in increasing equity and accessibility by trying to share resources, by trying to create trainings that were personalized and customized to different educators or to different needs of educators. And we also, and we also witnessed digital technology companies trying to integrate multiple functionalities across industries. We all know that the first go-to tool has been video conferencing tools such as the one that we are using right now. But the technological tools that we have been using and we have been needing throughout these times have not been limited to video conferencing. We have had learning management systems that have been upgraded, extended, or improved. We have had tools that aid in teaching and learning activities, such as tools for proctoring. We have had tools for gaming, or tools for gamified learning being improved as well. So across industries and across tools for teaching and learning, we have definitely been witnessing this increase and this concerted effort. However, in order for teaching and learning to be equitable and accessible, we definitely need way more than a sprint from digital technology companies. And this is what we are hoping to witness in the future times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan, for this quick summary. We had to summarize everything that we've been doing in few minutes. So thank you so much. The CTL we spoke with identified many challenges they have dealt with since the start of the pandemic. These challenges vary widely and have stretched their team's capacity in many directions. So please join me in welcoming Nathalie Duponsel, Ph.D. candidate in Educational Technology at Concordia University and research assistant on this project. Nathalie will share these challenges. Nathalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadia. So I'm going to talk to you, as Nadia just mentioned, about some of the challenges that the CTLs reported since the start of the pandemic. And they identified basically phases where they encountered challenges that differed depending on the phase that they were in, as well as some challenges that spanned across the phases and have been with them through this whole entire process. Excuse me. So the first phase was basically characterized as a phase of chaotic panic by a lot of the CTLs. They were urgently trying to move their courses online and to deal with the upcoming exams, many of which were sit-down exams that they now had to somehow move online. And so these were their two main focuses. Now the thing is that they were quite well aware that they could not maintain their usual standard of high education, high quality education, because of the urgency of the situation. So, and they were also quite aware that they were not really able to adequately address the accessibility issues that Ivan already referred to. And they knew that there were issues, for instance, such as students not having computers or not having access to internet at home. They knew about time zone issues with synchronous courses and synchronous exams. They knew about students who did not necessarily have the funds to access textbooks by themselves, so they would normally go to the library to be able to access textbooks in the reserve section. So they knew about all of these things, but unfortunately, because of the situation, because of the urgency and the suddenness of it, they weren't able to address them as they would normally like to. Now, fortunately, in the second phase, which took place over the summer, they were more able now to be proactive in their addressing of the issues that were arising. And so now they did return their focus back to high quality education. And they were encouraging professors to move away from just synchronous lecturing to taking more asynchronous approaches as well that could be more accessible to students who have various situations at home or who do not have computers, so that it would be easier for them to access the lectures and the course activities. And they were also encouraging professors to use more authentic assessment measures, moving away from sit-down exams, which are, not as great for learning as well as problematic when we're talking about online learning situations. So of course, to do this, they needed to have training for their professors, which was a challenge in itself because of the sheer number of professors that needed to be trained and in such a relatively short period of time. And there was also a wide range of prior knowledge from professors. There were some professors who had never used an online learning system, never mind authentic and engaging activities in classrooms and authentic assessment measures. So that was quite a challenge for them. They were also able in the second phase to turn their efforts back to making sure that they were able to offer accessible education. As Ivan mentioned, they were already aware of some of the technological access problems, and they were also aware of some of the issues due to students who didn't have computers and internet and that kind of thing. But other issues of equity became more apparent at this time as well. For instance, it became apparent that students with children, particularly mothers, were at a particular disadvantage, needing to take care of their children while daycares and schools were closed. They were aware now more clearly of students with disabilities, for which these online platforms were not all accessible using accessible software. Low-income students, again, had some issues, not only just dealing with not having computers, and many of them share households, and so there's a lot of background noise, there's a lot of distractions that these individuals were dealing with. And of course, foreign students, one of the issues that arose that was kind of a surprise was Zoom, for instance, was not accessible in China. So Chinese students who had returned home were suddenly not able now to access their courses. And then, of course, there was the unfortunate death of George Floyd in May in the US that brought to the forefront the issue of systemic racism. And CTLs were asked to provide guidelines for handling systemic racism, but they were very cautious because, first of all, there's no obvious answer. There's no quick solution. And second of all, they didn't want to provide suggestions unless they knew they would be effective. They didn't want to just provide suggestions for the sake of providing suggestions and recommendations, but then them not being effective. So these were issues that, of course, that were raised in the second phase, but then continued as they went into the third phase, which is the fall that we're now in. Now, at the time when we were looking at the reports from the CTLs, which was over the summer, they reported that they had no idea what to expect for the fall. They did anticipate that the last 2 weeks of the summer, they would expect a wave of requests from professors as they were focusing back on to their teaching. They also did anticipate that the first 2 weeks of the fall semester would probably primarily be on addressing technical issues. But for the most part, they didn't know what they were going to expect. And so they said that all they could do essentially was remain as flexible as possible and to address the needs as they arose. And it was a similar story for the winter phase, phase 4 for the coming winter semester. Many of them in the summer reported that they had no idea what to expect. We didn't know how the coronavirus would progress. We didn't know when a second wave would hit. So they really had no idea what to anticipate. And again, they said the best that they can do for now in preparation is just to make sure they have the personnel and to remain flexible to address these issues. Now, as I mentioned before, there were some challenges that were not related to any particular phase and just have been there throughout the process. And one of them, for instance, is fatigue. Now, initially in phase 1, at the end of the winter semester this past year, they had intense work hours and stress due to the amount of work that they had to do. And so obviously staff members, professors, students, they were all becoming very tired just because of that intensity. Now, as we've moved into phase 2, 3, and 4, the problem is that we've gone from a sprint to a marathon. And people started this marathon already tired. And so now patience and persistence, they're starting to wear thin. And so people are becoming impatient with each other. And there's a very big concern for burnout, particularly for staff at CTLs. Another issue is dealing with the mounting expectations of the CTLs. There's this perception now that they have more time than they did before, so they should be able to give more solutions to professors, to the university, to students. The problem is that they don't have all the answers. And although they do have more time, it's still not quite the amount of time that they would normally need. One CTL, reported that to do this transition, normally speaking, they said it would have taken them 3 years, but they've had to do this within a matter of months. So, these rising expectations have been a very big challenge for them. And although they want to recommend, give recommendations and guidelines, they don't want to give bad recommendations and guidelines. So they're kind of balancing this tension between wanting to do something, but not wanting to do any damage. They're also dealing with inflexibility from institutions, whether it be government or universities. Procedures that are normally quite helpful in normal times have become quite a hindrance in some circumstances, delaying CTL's ability to react swiftly. So these can be very frustrating, particularly over the summer when people needed vacation and were away. So sometimes they had to wait for the key person for 2 weeks until they were back on vacation. But of course they understood why this person had to be away. Everybody needed to rest. But of course it delayed their ability to move forward. And then finally, now they are facing, and they know they have to face this eventually, which is the challenge of how to measure success, how to determine if they've been successful. For many of them, their mandate changed drastically during this time as they adapted to the needs. So their usual measures weren't really necessarily appropriate anymore. So they now have the question of, okay, well, how are we going to measure our success? How do we determine if we're successful? Do we use our usual measures? Because perhaps our usual standards aren't necessarily going to be appropriate in this circumstance. So, of course, that was a very brief overview of some of the challenges that the CTLs encountered. You'll have to read the entire white paper to be able to see them all. I couldn't go through them all now. But although the situation looks a little bleak, it's not as bleak as one would think, which is why I'm going to hand you now to Azeneth, who will talk more about some of the solutions that the CTLs have already come up with and some of the promising future directions they'll be able to take.
Thank you, Nathalie. Just a quick note. So the white paper is available in English and in French now. So we have the two versions on Avvia's website and on my chair's website too. So feel free to go and have a look at all the challenges that the CTL were facing, because they were really a lot, and they were. This is why I think they were called the heroes of the COVID-19, because they were really facing challenges beyond the expectations, and they were able to manage their teams, and at the same time manage all that was happening around. So Azeneth Patino, Ph.D. candidate in education technology at Université Laval, on behalf of herself and her colleague Edem, she will present a synthesis of the panorama we produced on publicly shared resources to support faculty and students during the online transitions. These resources focused on the use of technology, various pedagogical approaches, ways to achieve equitable learning experiences for students, socialization and well-being, and strategies for working with faculty and students. So please join me in welcoming Azeneth. Azeneth, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Good morning, everyone. Yes, as it was mentioned right before, as part of the project, we perform an analysis of online resources that were publicly shared by Centers for Teaching and Learning in 23 countries around the globe. Now, here we're talking about online resources addressed to faculty members and students to support the transition to online courses during the COVID-19 pandemic, at least the take one. The first lockdown. Now, we identified different types of support that were available for faculty and students, a series of recommended technologies, approaches, focus areas, and solutions developed by Centers for Teaching and Learning. And as it was mentioned by Nadia and Nathalie, all this information can be consulted in detail directly on the white paper, which is available on the Avvia website. Here today, I'm going to focus on two things. The first one is about the main topics addressed in these publicly shared resources that reflect faculty members' concerns and interest. And that is, in the first place, academic integrity in online teaching and learning, online assessment and evaluation, student engagement in online learning activities and tasks, student communication, and last but not least, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. In fact, we had a special focus on equity resources. We found out that almost half of the institutions included in our analysis were lacking resources on equity, which it kind of reveals the need for institutional policies to ensure equity, accessibility, and inclusion in universities, sort of on the international scale. Now, on the positive side, institutions sharing equity resources were using terms such as, well, equity, but also web and digital accessibility, diversity, inclusion, equality, accommodations, and inclusive pedagogies. Now, the inclusive pedagogies term refers to pedagogical approaches and strategies aimed at promoting inclusion and ensuring equity. Just as an example, anti-racist and anti-oppressive pedagogies, as well as universal design for learning, were frequently mentioned in the analyzed resources. Also, many equity resources included recommendations to ensure equitable learning experiences to all students, especially vulnerable students, which, according to our data and the analyzed resources, refer to students with physical or learning activities, students lacking appropriate technological equipment or internet bandwidth, students who were sick or stressed due to COVID-19, students lacking ICT competencies to perform learning tasks online, and students in different time zones, which mostly refer to international students who went back to their home countries and therefore were unable to fully participate in asynchronous live sessions or activities. Additionally, students' sex and gender, students' ethnicity, and students' socioeconomic status were frequently mentioned when it concerned equity groups. As for the recommendations and resources to ensure equity, we realized there were institutional initiatives directly addressed to students, such as providing financial aid and technical equipment. There were scholarships or loaning all kind of computers, headset, and so on in some universities. But most of the recommendations were addressed to faculty members, and they refer to creating accessible materials, providing flexible timing for completing assignments and homework, recording lectures for asynchronous availability, captioning videos and providing audio content, for instance, choosing appropriate technologies with accessibility features. And all these recommendations actually bring up the second point I wanted to mention today. That is to highlight the important role played by faculty members and all teaching professionals in reality, even instructional designers, in ensuring equity in educational context. I mean, even if there is no institutional policies or government support, all teaching professionals, by just making simple gestures such as creating accessible materials, captioning videos, being flexible with the due dates for assignments and homeworks and projects, we can actually make a big difference to ensure equity. So especially if we choose the appropriate technologies that include all these accessibility features that they just need to be activated on the profile page. I mean, all these recommendations are in reality just simple gestures that can potentially have a great impact on students and that can improve, I believe, to get a better learning experience on students. So that's it. My 2 points. I'll wrap it up. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Azeneth, pour encore une fois une synthèse super rapide. Pour savoir plus, il faut aller voir le livre blanc, et puis aussi on a écrit, we co-authored an article in The Conversation that was published 2 days ago sur exactement comment aborder l'équité à partir des résultats qu'on a trouvés.
Exactly. If I might add, I just wanted to say, if anyone has any questions or want to continue the conversation, you can ask your questions directly on social media using the hashtag that it's been shared on the screens, and we can carry on the conversation because there's really a lot to talk about this. We're just trying to wrap it up right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Azeneth. Donc, pour finir cette présentation-là, je vais passer à quelques recommandations qu'on a pu en tirer on a pu demander au bureau de soutien à l'enseignement de partager avec nous, bien qu'ils n'étaient pas encore prêts à faire cette réflexion sur qu'est-ce qui était possible, qu'est-ce qui était, comment recommander, comment vraiment présenter et partager des recommandations. Mais on a réussi à le faire. Donc, ces bureaux-là que nous avons rencontrés ont partagé avec nous 5 catégories de leçons tirées des recommandations. La première leçon qu'ils veulent partager avec les autres centres, c'est premièrement, il faut absolument prendre soin de leurs équipes afin que ces équipes-là puissent s'occuper du corps professoral. Donc, ils parlaient de comment il faut absolument partager les commentaires positifs qu'ils reçoivent de la part des professeurs avec leurs équipes. ceci les motive, surtout quand les enjeux sont élevés et que le moral est bas. Et puis là, on sait qu'on rentre dans une deuxième vague et puis on est tous fatigués. Et l'équipe dans ces bureaux de soutien à l'enseignement ont travaillé depuis mars non-stop. Donc, un peu on sait que la fatigue s'en vient et puis c'est important de partager avec eux comment leur travail est bien apprécié. Aider l'équipe à travailler en équipe, impliquer les professeurs le plus possible, envisager d'adopter une approche de travail à distance hybride quand c'est possible, respecter le temps dont leur équipe a besoin pour compléter un processus de façon efficiente et efficace. Il faut mettre en place des politiques de bien-être appropriées, valoriser l'équipe et, quand c'est possible, aplatir la hiérarchie. Mettre en œuvre l'approche de tous pour un et un pour tous au sein de l'équipe et avec la diversité d'unités institutionnelles. La deuxième catégorie se penchait sur comment il faut supporter l'idée de travailler plus intelligemment plutôt que plus fort. Donc, garder les choses simples. La surcharge cognitive se produit, même chez les professeurs. Prendre une approche holistique, ne pas se laisser cataloguer. Il faut mettre en place une plateforme qui permettra d'extraire immédiatement les besoins du corps professoral à l'aide d'enquêtes continues. Accepter que le changement est difficile. On sait ça, mais il faut vraiment l'accepter et puis adapter les services au niveau d'expertise et aux besoins des professeurs et toujours célébrer les petites réussites. Parce qu'encore une fois, ces petites réussites vont motiver l'équipe, motiver les professeurs, etc. Personnaliser et étendre les soins et le suivi. Donc, ce suivi après le soin est aussi important que les soins qu'on donne. Apprendre les professeurs à pêcher. Donc, les aider. Au début, peut-être, on peut faire une partie à leur place, mais vraiment les aider à devenir autonomes et confiants en ligne pour qu'ils puissent concevoir les meilleures expériences possibles d'apprentissage à leurs étudiants sans dépendre d'autres personnes. Surtout que les équipes dans ces bureaux-là sont des équipes limitées et on n'a pas beaucoup de personnes qui travaillent. Donc, vraiment, là, si on arrive à avoir cette autonomie-là développée chez les professeurs, ça va vraiment faciliter tout le processus. La troisième catégorie focusée sur l'empathie. Comment il faut pratiquer l'empathie avec les coéquipiers et le corps professoral. Il faut trouver des experts au sein des facultés et profiter de leur point de vue d'initié, écouter les membres du corps professoral, créer et entretenir un espace bienveillant pour les échanges interfacultaires, rappeler aux professeurs d'être empathiques. Ils le sont, mais parfois la fatigue les emporte un peu, donc il faut être empathique, comme Azeneth vient de le mentionner, patient envers les étudiants et de reconnaître leurs efforts. Écouter les étudiants, communiquer. La communication était au centre de toutes nos discussions avec ces centres-là, que ça soit au début de la pandémie, entre les centres, entre les différentes personnes qui travaillent au centre, mais aussi avec les facultés et puis le corps professoral. Rassurer les gens. On n'a pas toujours les mêmes réponses, les bonnes réponses ou bien les réponses, comme Nathalie a mentionné. Donc, même si on n'a pas la réponse, au moins on peut assurer les personnes autour de nous qu'on est en train d'essayer de trouver la réponse, même si on ne l'a pas. Il faut cultiver des rapports personnels, trouver des stratégies pour maintenir l'élan des membres du corps professoral au-delà de la crise. La quatrième catégorie focusait vraiment sur toute la question de l'évaluation. Donc, c'est toute une histoire avec l'évaluation. Et puis, une recommandation qui était partagée par tout le monde, c'était qu'il faut absolument surmonter l'obstacle qui est l'évaluation avec des solutions pratiques. Il faut absolument donner des exemples et puis essayer de donner des solutions pratiques aux professeurs pour qu'ils puissent aborder cette problématique-là. Et puis, finalement, tout le monde était avec une même perspective. Il est temps pour que ces centres-là prennent le leadership. Il faut viser les étoiles, mais reconnaître les limites. Il faut garder une longueur d'avance et rester proactif. Il faut absolument qu'ils continuent à faire entendre leur voix. Il faut prendre des risques et accepter qu'ils ont le droit de faire des erreurs. On est tous en train d'expérimenter. On est tous dans un milieu dans un état qu'on ne connaît pas, c'est nouveau, et puis ils ont le droit de faire des erreurs. Il existe de nombreuses roues utiles, il faut arrêter d'en réinventer de nouvelles. briser les cloisonnements, c'était aussi au centre des discussions. Et puis, donner de la valeur à l'enseignement par rapport à la recherche. Ça aussi, c'était super important. Et finalement, rester prêt à affronter la politique. Parce que là, il y a les processus maintenant, vu la crise, il y a plein de choses qui sont faites dans ce contexte-là. Mais il faut savoir, après la crise, quand on s'habitue à la crise, de savoir comment naviguer la politique. I would like to end this presentation with Roger Kaufman's last words in our white paper. C'était ses derniers mots dans notre white paper, dans notre livre blanc, et j'aimerais aussi terminer cette présentation-là avec ces derniers mots. Roger was a key member of our team, and we lost him almost a week ago. So, Roger's final words to the centers were, centers have to help, but also show leadership in changing the current education model. Otherwise, we are just putting band-aids on brain tumors. Centers, you know how to do it, and you can do it. Keep your seat at the table. Add measurable value to our shared words. Merci tout le monde pour être présent aujourd'hui avec nous. Je regarde, on a 147 personnes qui nous ont joints durant cette première heure.